tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami. You almost completed a full day. Some of you are laughing. Well, it's not easy when you're doing a retreat. Even though we started late I say because usually when it is a full day retreat, we would start around 5:30 the latest. You'd be in the puja hall. And then it would go on until 9, 10 o'clock you'd put your head onto the pillow. You would need it. So, aren't you glad it wasn't like one of those days? But nevertheless, it's not easy, especially if you haven't. Like most of as far as I know, around the world, people are not having still retreats. Because of obvious reasons, health reasons, etc., etc. So the body and the mind especially has gotten lazy. Lazy. We have to be able to say that about ourselves. Underline, underscore, highlight, in spotlight. And we cannot help it. Almost everyone I know has put on some weight. Right? You're giggling. Well, it's inevitable. When we get comfy, meaning comfortable with the status quo, it's almost like falling into a ditch. If you've ever seen a train that has to be on these two lines, most trains do. That is its own path. But once it comes off of that rail, it's very difficult to lift it and put it back. A retreat does that, if you know what you're doing. Otherwise, it can easily turn into some type of a mental control, discipline, forcefulness, suppression, which defeats the whole purpose. I mean, it will give your ego a major boost. It will make you feel good, like, yes, I completed. But really, what has changed? There needs to be a sense of lightness at the end of the day about how you approach life. So it has this ability to make the person become more mature. And that is what we oftentimes are doing when we are doing these things called meditation session in our own homes. Those are the mini retreats that we do. Maybe an hour a day, maybe 2, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour at night. Those are also, consider them as retreats. Simply because you're by yourself doesn't make it anything less. Because ultimately, a true, genuine retreat also means that you might be in a room full of this many people, maybe more, but you're still working solo. In some countries, people love to make noise when they're meditating. Different types of noise, bodily noises, moving, making noises, and that makes everyone else feel comfortable. Oh, okay, I can do that. I can. Silly things, just to pull you out of the meditation session. Because what it's doing is it's actually sharpening your skill set. One of the qualities of wisdom is that it is very sharp and it is very strong, like diamond. Diamond. Diamond is what actually cuts every kind of other material, pretty much. Except, nothing cuts a diamond, they say, other than a diamond. That's wisdom. So every time you're meditating in the proper way, you are sharpening your wisdom. And if you never had any wisdom, guess what? You're building it. It's like anything else. It's like moving the train that has been off of its rail back on the rail. And that's why even your outfit is different, let's say. You're wearing white. You're sitting in your own spot. You're not speaking. We call that noble silence. And you're surrounded by so many people. When you look at it sociologically, this is very unusual. This is true ritual. Last week we were talking about rites and rituals. We already are involved in rites and rituals. But the proper way, when you are working with sati, that's the purest form of rites and ritual. The right kind. Unfortunately, most of us are engaged in the wrong kind, and that is what I will be discussing today briefly. And those are part of the things that Lord Buddha listed as Samyojanas, fetters, bonds, things that tie you. And we have about 10 of them. Fetters. Shackles, things that you see prisoners tied up in. Maybe their wrists, their feet, ankles, sometimes even thumbs. I've seen thumbs, shackles for thumbs. We call it wisdom because in opposite of avijjha or ignorance, simply because we have eyes, but we don't see that we are shackled. We are fettered. That's why only a small portion of the Malaysian population is here today. That's why only a certain small, minuscule number of human beings practice meditation every day. Now, when I say very small, that's still in the millions. And the wonderful thing about positive energy is that it really doesn't have to be the same amount on both sides of the equation. Positive energy has this beautiful quality to it. It is more dense with energy, with creativity, which you need one meditator for so many other putujanas. And the way I like to think of it is one sotapanna, the first stage of awakening, to about 1 million putujanas, regular people, who are lost in the 10 fetters, bound by the 10 fetters. And that is my hope, to help you all become, not stay as putujanas, but become sotapannas. It's ambitious. But I learned from the greatest teachers of all, greatest, Lord Buddha. And he was able to do it because he gave us the Dhamma. If you have the Dhamma and you're practicing the Eightfold Path, and there are people who are teaching the Eightfold Path properly, and you're practicing it, you will become an Arahant, Lord Buddha says. At the very least, a Sotapanna. So today's sutta, interestingly enough, was actually, it revolves around not the normal teacher, meaning a bhikkhu, meaning Venerable Sariputta or Lord Buddha himself. No, it comes to us from the mouth of a lay disciple. Lay, like you all. The name of the lay disciple was Chitta. Chitta was very well known at his time. He was very rich, he was married 4 times. He had 4 wives at the same time. That's what I mean by 4 times. Not today when you hear somebody getting married 4 times, this means divorced that many times almost. No. So this also, as you're hearing the words, the explanations that this lay disciple, Chitta, is teaching bhikkhus, and he was known for that. As a lay disciple, he would teach Mahatheras, people who were in robes for decades. There's a certain subtlety, simplicity, groundedness, pragmatism, being practical, as a layman, as a businessman. One day Chitta comes home after hearing the Lord Buddha having given a talk, and he actually attained Anagami stage. Anagami means non-returner. That means the person will no longer be interested in sensuality. For a layman, usually, sex. And you have 4 wives. At least 2 of them were very, very young for his age. So he comes home and he calls over his 4 wives and he says, I'm going to be your brother, you will be my sisters, if you want to stay in the same household. If you want to stay. But if you want to leave, please, feel free. If you have your eye on someone, if there was this one person that you liked, but because you were marrying me, you couldn't continue that, and they're available, don't worry, I will actually give your hand in marriage to that person. And I think 1 or 2 of his wives choose that option. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is it's really an extreme for us, even for you as lay people, even for a lay standard, that's like, wow. And on top of that, he knew the Dhamma. So the title of this discourse is Samyojana Sutta. It is from the Samyutta Nikaya, 41.1, yes. In fact, he was so knowledgeable by the Dhamma, of the Dhamma, through the Dhamma, in passing on the Dhamma, that there's a huge section within the Samyutta Nikaya. Within the Samyutta Nikaya dedicated to him because of the teachings that he provides. So, Samyojana, before I delve into it as to what it is, it's good to go over them. So we have 2 groups of fetters that Lord Buddha talked about. He usually delineated them, branched them off into 2 major groups, lower and higher. Higher doesn't mean they're better. They're just very subtle. They're hard to get to. you know. It's almost like a disease that's inside all the organs. Then compared to the other pieces of tumors and things that can be removed, they're more visible, they're more tangible. So the higher fetters, I would like you to think of them as more pervasive, spread everywhere. So I will, I could list them to you, but it's good to know because I have not spoken about them, I don't think much in my book. The hindrances earlier during today's retreat I was talking about, but I didn't want to write them on the board because it's already explained in detail in the book, which you have already. But I chose to ask Brother Leslie to set this up because it's good to have a visual whenever we talk about fetters. What are the fetters? What are the Samyojanas? Without getting rid of these 10, without relinquishing these 10 fetters, without breaking from them, it is impossible to attain any of the stages, in fact. The first stage has to be getting rid of 3 of these fetters. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to go to the board, and I'm going to write it as big as I can so that I can get to the back of the room. And if you cannot see them, I will be saying them out loud and pointing at them, and I will also number them. So in case you cannot see in the beginning, we will leave it. Later on, you can even come and take a snapshot of it. They're available online as well, everywhere. So I think I have some of them in the book, but not in broken down the way I'm planning to. All right, so let's go to the board. Samyojanas. I don't like to do PowerPoints because I just don't have the time. Plus, it removes the attention from listening fully. This is an exception that we're doing, and that's why I want to do it live for you. And I used to be a high school teacher for over a decade, so this takes me back. It's very weird. So the first Samyojana is part of 3, actually. So 1, 2, and 3, they go together. As you're practicing meditation, as you're practicing the Eightfold Path, especially, the first of which happens to be right view, yes? Right view, Sammaditthi. Sammaditthi is crucial to be able to shed the light, the spotlight on these fetters. Now, as you're practicing the light, think of it, Sammaditthi becomes brighter, more understanding comes in. As you're practicing, that's what we call Vipassana's effect, that the insight that we talk about. That's what it is. But as you're practicing, what happens is you get tangible results in your behavior. That's why I always say, trust the behavior, not the words. Not the title of someone. Not their words, not their testimonials. Look at them. That's what Lord Buddha talked about when he spoke very clearly in the Vimansaka Sutta from the Majjhima Nikaya. The investigation of what? Of the teacher. Because ultimately the teacher simply is serving there as a placeholder for yourself. You look at the teacher and say, if he could do it or she could do it, then I could do it too. Not bad. So it is possible. That's what the teacher's function, one of them is. Because ideally the teacher has already gone through these. Taken off the shackles. That's why Lord Buddha was the most excellent of teachers, as well as his Arya Savakas, his noble disciples. So without further ado, the first Samyojana or fetter, Sakkhaya Ditthi. Sakkhaya Ditthi. This is what usually is translated as personality view. This is me, this is mine, this is who I am. I like this. This is my personality, okay? How many times do we hear that? From ourselves, at least. He's pushing my buttons. Don't try to change me, okay? Sakkhaya Ditthi. We all have that. We have to start from somewhere. Well, that's where it is. The first one. Now, they don't go in order necessarily, but we just start like this. But the group has to be intact with the 5, as lower Samyojanas. Next, we have Viccikiccha. Sometimes people don't, well, I'll just do it like this. In English, people like to put a T, they can't pronounce they don't know how to pronounce the C. The C in Pali, it's a Ch, like my name, Candana. Sometimes it actually has the H next to it, Viccikiccha. So, Viccikiccha is the doubt, the skeptical doubt. Why the Dhamma? What's so special about the Buddha? You have teachers who talk about, well, the Buddha taught something, but if you look deep enough, you have the same teaching in other religions. I've heard that, even from bhikkhus, from this tradition as well, Theravada. All wrong view. If you remember from a few weeks ago, we talked about Ratana Sutta. And in the verse from the Ratana Sutta, it says very clearly, there is nothing like this Dhamma. Not in this world, not in any universe. Because it is the jewel. And there's nothing, no jewel like it in any cosmos, in any Brahma realm. Nowhere. So how can we compare? But the person has to have this Viccikiccha, the doubt. And this is where you go, you hear about individuals who go to a retreat, Dhamma retreat, and then a few weeks later they hear about this very famous teacher, and next you know they are registered for going and listening to them, and they're like, oh, you're not going to believe this Eckhart Tolle guy, this Satguru guy, this is incredible teaching, incredible this. That doesn't happen for a person who does not have this anymore. But it happens when there is still doubt. But it's not just about the Dhamma or the teaching or the teacher. It's especially about us. I don't think I'm practicing it correctly. I don't think this is the right technique. Like, how many of you today had that thought? Is this the right technique? I think I like the breath meditation better. Why metta? All these things happen because the mind is not settled. It is not experiencing the certainty that comes in the absence of Viccikiccha. Next, the third one is what we talked about last time. Some of you are saying it. Silabbata Paramasa. Rites and rituals. Rites and rituals. This is important because you have this in almost every, I cannot even just say religious tradition. You also have this in different ways of thinking, disciplines, where people have this tendency to turn something into rites and rituals. For example, if you have certain symptoms of PTSD, especially if it's bordering obsessive compulsive disorder or symptoms of that, you have these rituals, if you've ever heard of them. Washing the hand, for example, 36 times. What if you lose count? Oops, you have to start again. What if the count has to be 76 times? Guess what? I had those symptoms when I had, initially when I had my injuries, when the PTSD first hit me at the age of 8, from the bathroom to the living room area where my parents would be, well, my mom would have the tables set, it would sometimes take me 45 minutes or more to get there because I was too busy washing my hands in a certain way. And then having to walk, because the corridor, the hallway, had black marble surrounded by white, but the pattern was with the black marble. In my head, as an OCD person, I had developed this idea, ritual, to walk on the black marble line without skipping even an inch space between them. So the heel had to be touching the toes of the other foot. We laugh, but it was painful, truly painful. You would cry, you would like, I want to break free from this. Plus the food got cold. So my parents had given up because the therapist that they took me to, she was like, this is something that he could be stuck with. Most people are. Or you can overcome. You can. I don't count how many times I wash my hands. So that's the power of the mind. So we might laugh at these weird rituals, but we all have them to some extent. Do you ever reach for your phone even though the phone didn't ring? To check? Even though it didn't vibrate, it didn't do anything? Because that's the new rituals that we have. Or you park the car, you hit the alarm, you go back to the office, and then you say, did I hit the alarm? And you walk back down and try to get close enough to hit the alarm again. Things that people do. So next we get to Kama Raga. This is when we have the sensuality, the craving for sense pleasures. Kama Raga. Craving it. You lose sleep over this because you don't have your favorite most food or something that really pleases you. So seeking of the pleasure aspect in life binds us, gets us stuck. And this goes hand in hand with the next one, which is also earlier I mentioned in part of the hindrances, Vyapada or Vyapada. So I'll quickly write, I forgot I didn't. Ill will, sometimes called hatred, sometimes called anger, depending on the context. Sensual, you can call it lust, Silabbata Paramasa, so that's rites and rituals. Now, the first one is skeptical doubt. You can call it personality view. It's more than a view, it's a belief. Even though it's Ditthi, which is for view, it is more of a belief. It's like your driving force. It's your identity. It's like your DNA in your mind. This is me. Bhante, don't try to change me. I've heard that. You're here asking me questions. Plus, no one can change anyone else. The person needs to want to change themselves. But if this has its roots deep enough, it's very difficult to shake it. And that's why you must put yourself in seemingly uncomfortable situations like a retreat. Uncomfortable compared to the rest of your blasé life, for example, routine life. Because when you are in a retreat setting, you are face to face with the mirror of reality as to how you really function. Yes?
The first one, is it also like stubbornness?
Well, it's not necessarily stubbornness. Stubbornness will fall more in the second group, I would say. It's a combination of few. Stubbornness is also part of the attitude, and it's also part of the anusayas, the underlying tendencies, which is a combination of avijjha. You also have mana, a lot of mana, which is this conceit, which is in the second group. It's coming up. But definitely it's combined with this, yes.
Belief in the self?
Yes, personality belief. Even though we say personality idea or view, that I have a self that is separate from everything, and that is the thing which is carrying from life to life. That is the danger. That is the danger, because it connects with the eternalist view, which we talked about. If we have eternalist view, then you cannot have samma ditthi. You cannot be on the path. Forget it. You cannot be attaining even the first stage, because the person is too attached to this. Personality belief. I feel more comfortable with belief than view. Okay?
Negative belief?
Is it?
Is it negative belief? More negative than positive?
Well, when you look at the grand scheme of things, it's absolutely negative. Because this is the source for avijjha to continue. You said the word stubbornness. Life is happening, but you're saying, no, stay away, life. It's like the tree that says, you plant it and it says, I'm not going to send down my roots. Stay away. So wanting to stay separate. And we do everything in our power to stay separate in life. The hairstyle, the likes and dislikes. We spend decades in our lives trying to find what is different about me. Thinking that I am really unique in having this soul entity within me that changes only the outside, but inside it stays the same. That's Sakkhaya Ditthi, which is really one of the reasons, because you have to have three of them, and they come in three, at least, in this sense, which is the reason why you don't leave samsara, and you haven't left samsara, the cycle of rebirth. Now, I will go over the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So here we have, we call it Rupa, Raga. And then we have Arupa Raga. And then we have Mana. Avijjha.
Lust for material and Uddhacca.
Ah, yes. We left it in the right place. Yes, thank you. We encountered it today quite a bit in your meditation. Restlessness was with you more than sati was. Right? She's laughing. Every time you sit, moving. Well, my knees aren't relaxed. My knees aren't calm. My knees are not in the right, my foot, my ankle is not in the right foot. Well, when is it ever going to get in the right position? Really? By the time you fix this position, guess what? Something else starts twitching. Oh, something's walking on my back or something. Once I was in California in the desert, we were doing a 10-day retreat. And we were sitting in this small house-like, converted, basically it was a Dhamma hall. Small house, but it was converted into Dhamma hall. That's where most of us were sitting to do this 10-day retreat. And the other retreatant was sitting in front of me, and it would get cold at night, so we would have blankets. Now, because it's the desert, and the sand is pretty pale, light colored, also the insects are going to be like that often. As I'm meditating with my eyes open, suddenly I come to and I see that there's this thing crawling up my fellow meditator's back on the blanket. So that got my attention. So I looked and I saw that it was a white spider. It's about this big, maybe bigger. Walking comfortably. I don't know whether I should nudge him. I was like, hey, you know, or push, you know, I don't want to kill the spider. Anyhow, I said, well, that's his karma. And plus, it didn't look like it was vicious. It was just minding its own business. Well, an hour or so later, I'm meditating, still, and I feel something walking behind my ear. Now, I hadn't moved, I was still sitting in the same place. And then I feel something come up, and meanwhile, restlessness is going crazy in me. It's like, okay, now is officially the right, appropriate time. Even the Buddha would say, go ahead and move it, whatever it is. That's what I thought. But I said, no, let me see how far I can push this. Meaning my comfort level with restlessness. So this is very important, to be able to do that. So this is an encouragement for you to be bearing in mind that not everything that happens to you is a carte blanche or a permission or a green light for you to go ahead and move the body any way you want. Put some resistance. You put resistance towards meditation all the time. But at least use the resistance now in a healthy way. So this one would be Uddhacca. So Rupa Raga is seeking, still craving for rebirth into form realms. Realms, different states of being. Other than human realms, there's many realms. Perhaps one day we should go over that as a topic. 31 layers of existence, yes. So there's a portion of the realms, especially the Brahma realms. They're known as form realms, where there isn't the lust, there isn't that passion, there isn't, earlier I was talking about the sensual aspect of existing. Instead, it is form-based. It is form-based. It's a refined state. Today you were doing metta. It is a Brahma Vihara. We're dealing with the Brahma realms, which are also considered to be part of the Rupa portions of existence, realms of existence. So this person who has this fetter is a person who is still functioning with that longing of being reborn in those realms. It's subtle. It's subtle. They might not even think about it, but it's there. So they have to do some digging. Sorry?
Like the people who are thinking of going to Pure Land.
Yeah, that could also be it, yes. Yes. But I'm talking about even more developed individuals. Because the person who thinks about the Pure Land has a lot of these. First they have to overcome these. So they have wrong view. But they also have that desire. But what I'm talking about are the individuals who have developed, and they've even broken away from these 5 Samyojana, but this is so subtly there in them. So that's why they need to really do plenty of penetrative insight meditation, a lot of wisdom work. And I'm going to now break it into as to who is where in relation to the 4 stages of awakened individuals. So quickly, Arupa means the formless realms. There are realms that are beyond form. These are the places where Siddhartha Gautama's teachers, Alara Kalama and Uddhacca, for example, were reborn into. It's a very long time period. Once you're reborn in there, in those realms, it's very long. Trust me. I mean, based on what we're talking about in the suttas, very long. So 60,000 Mahakalpas, the other one 84,000 Mahakalpas. Each Mahakalpa is a Big Bang, reaches that maximum point, the same length of time as the Big Bang took, expansion, and then the big crunch, contraction, same amount of time, and then that point of singularity, same amount of time. Put these 4 together, you have a Mahakalpa. 84,000 of those. You do not want to be reborn in these realms. It looks like forever, but it's not, because usually when you fall out of it, you really fall out of it. It's like somebody being reborn in royalty, never touched anything, never taken care of themselves, never wiped themselves, never eaten by themselves. Somebody fed them. So when they come out of that world, suddenly they collapse. They usually will go to the opposite extreme, meaning hell realms. That's why Lord Buddha always discouraged anybody from being reborn in those realms. Anyhow, we can give talks on that. So mana is, conceit. Arupa, formless realm. Think of it, desire to be reborn. Reborn. So here is the form. And then conceit, this is a big one. This has a lot to do with the stubbornness you were mentioning. So this goes deep. And in the Anguttara Nikaya, Lord Buddha talks very clearly as to the qualities that need to be relinquished by a person who wants to become an arahant. And in the Dhamma, in Buddhism, we have 3 kinds of conceit. Conceit that is looking up at someone. You are better than me. That's a conceit. Then we have the equal. Oh, you and I are the same. And that's also conceit, according to the Dhamma. And then there's a 3rd kind of conceit. I am better than you over there. Conceit. So in Western psychology or pop psychology, we have these terms called inferiority complex, superiority complex. Think of those 2. But we don't have anything about the matching. So, what we have in the case in Dhamma, even looking at someone else and saying, you and I are the same, that is also conceit, because it keeps us stuck. What I call it oftentimes in my translations, comparing and contrasting. So you don't move, you're always thinking and you're like, okay, am I the same as him? Okay, he did this, okay, let me do this too. You see this a lot, even in advanced meditators. Then you get to the restlessness part, which I talked about. And then you get to the big one, ignorance. So, because I don't want to spend most of my time on this one, So here you have these three working together. And then you have, I'll do it this way, dash. And then you have in blue this group. So the first three are crucial. If you like, you can take a picture later. You can even take it from the front and close. So, yes. Ah, thank you. Please remind me, Leslie. So the first three of the lower fetters, or the first three fetters, or the Samyojana, have to be dropped and will be dropped in a person who has attained right view, capital R, capital V, meaning they have become Sotapanna. They have passed the point of no return. They have now Jnana Dassana, knowledge and vision of the Dhamma. Okay? So they are the ones who don't have these. Now, when I say that, we need to understand that it is not like completely removed, because the person still has an identity, but it's very foggy. The explanation that somebody was asking, how could I describe that or explain that? To the best of my abilities in trying to explain this to people would be something like this. The world is knocking on your door, but there's nobody to answer. That's one way of trying to capture it, because these are not. Well, let me just use the second Samyojana to describe it. There is no doubt anymore. Somebody comes and says, hey, let's go and listen to this teacher in different discipline. Even within the Dhamma, within some tradition of Buddhism, let's say, somebody comes and teaches you some Mahayana idea, which doesn't fit the Theravada, Lord Buddha's original ideas. You're saying, thank you very much. There's no way. There's no way. Now, this person 5 minutes ago might have been sold on the idea. Not anymore. After they pass that point of no return, it's impossible for them, even if they want to, even if you pay them, they cannot. Because they don't have doubt. They recognize the Dhamma. That's why I say the Dhamma is in your heart, not in some book published by someone, or even online. That's why when we listen to the Dhamma, we need to listen with our hearts, not with the intellect, analyzing. Does this agree with this certain Ajahn statement, or this Visuddhimagga? No! You don't care. They don't matter to you. You will recognize immediately what is Dhamma from what is Adhamma. It will scream at you what is Adhamma. Nobody can sugarcoat it. It's impossible. Then you have this. You will see some people chanting, beating the drums, chiming, chanting for days, saying mantras, wearing special gadgets and things, and thinking that that's Dhamma, getting tattoos of something. You're like, no. Rites and rituals. You might have been one of those people. No more. So this is where we have a total personality change, transformation. That's why the person can never become a Putujjana again. This person is no longer a Putujjana. And that's the reason why Lord Buddha said they will no longer fall into the 4 lower realms. Impossible. They will never become a cow. They will never become a ghost. They will never, ever be reborn in the hell realms. Impossible. Because when they close their eyes, it's just the Dhamma. Their heart is beating with the tune of the Dhamma. If I use that kind of colorful language. And then we have these two. This is, if you notice, there's a dashed line around it. It's not a solid line. And the reason for that is, these two, we're now talking about the second stage awakened one, meaning Sakadagami. Sakadagami is a once returner. Now if you notice, the lines are still there, but they are dashed. They're not solid. For this type of a person, these two are shaking. Someone was asking me, Bhante, how would you describe it? Based on your knowledge of the text and the suttas and all that, how would you describe this then, to your own understanding? I said, I guess what we can say is this. Have you ever had a tooth when you were a child that was about to be pulled, but it wasn't falling? You move it, baby tooth we say, or, it's moving, and you gently try to tug it, and it doesn't move, and you just leave it. But it's moving. Any moment it can come off. These two are like that. That's why when I see a Sakadagami, I push and push and push them to get those two out. But it's very tempting, because we've had these two forever. Lusting for food, lusting for sex, lusting for things, lusting for sleep. All these things are there. They're very primal. And the same goes with hatred, anger, Vyapada, ill will. For this kind of a person, they get mad. They cannot carry it too long. You have people sometimes carrying their grudge, their anger, their frustration for decades. And when you go and ask them, why are you still angry at your uncle? They say, I'm angry, but don't ask me why, because I don't remember. As a therapist, I've had people who tell me, like, I hate them, I do. Yeah, but why? I don't remember the details, but I just know I hate them. So, now the third level, which is an anagami, who happens to be an anagami, is a person who has no more of this. Actually, I'll just do this. And when we're talking about the removal of these two, we're also talking obviously about the removal of these also. Because you cannot remove these two without the first group, exactly. Because you cannot just suddenly become a Sakadagami by skipping being a Sotapanna. Doesn't work. So, here is the big one. Anagami has to work through these five. These are very subtle. That's why when you asked me about Pure Land, I said it doesn't have to be just the Pure Land individual. It could be especially those who are very advanced, even anagamis. They have these, especially conceit is one. Lord Buddha once had a student, a monk, who was an anagami and who was just living life lackadaisically. He was very relaxed. He was saying, I'm okay. I'm an anagami. I shouldn't try so hard now. I can relax. I can relax now. And Lord Buddha gives this very poignant, very real, in this culture, in this world, very off-putting type of a statement maybe. He says, when you go to the bathroom, you do number 2, and you wash your hands, but there's a little bit of excrement left in their nail or somewhere. Everywhere else you washed it. When you smell it, is it as equally bad? Do you feel disgusted? Or you say, yes, it's clean. No, it's still dirty. You know it's dirty. He says, you still have that dirt. To the anagami. Go and work it out. Go and finish and become an arahant. Shakes the person into doing the work that he still had to do. So, restlessness, I keep telling meditators, is going to be with you until you become an arahant. Deal with it. Work through it. Become friends with it. And avijjha is the big one. So that's why I try to encourage you to always be soft with yourself. More tolerant. More compassionate with yourself. Because this is deep. Avijjha is deep. And that's why only the Dhamma that Lord Buddha taught can get a person out of samsara, because his teaching is the only one that possesses wisdom. The antidote to avijjha is wisdom, plain and simple. Not something that claims to be Dhamma but does not have panya will do the job. Only the Eightfold Path, the teaching that contains purely the Eightfold Path, nothing here and there added, taken out, no rites and rituals, because you have traditions that have developed around this. If you say this many mantras, then you're good. If you do this many prostrations, you're good. You're good as in you become awakened or something. That's just nonsense. It's not Dhamma. Absolutely not Dhamma. Adhamma, Lord Buddha calls it, and he repeatedly mentions this throughout the suttas. The days will come, he says, where Adhamma will be proclaimed and sold to people as Dhamma. So that's why we need to study the suttas, the original suttas, go back to them, scrutinize, carefully investigate, match the two. I mean the Tipitaka, the suttas themselves, and the Vinaya text, because in the Vinaya you have a lot of teachings, a lot of suttas. You will cross-reference. If you find something once, watch out. Chances are it's added later. Okay? So, I will now go to the sutta. So, this is from the Connected Discourses. Sangyutta Nikaya, number 41.1. It comes from the collection that is called Salayatana on the Sixth Sense Basis collection. And it is from the section dedicated to Chitta. Chitta, whom I mentioned earlier, the lay person. And the sutta itself is called Samyojana Sutta, Discourse on the Fetter, or Fetters, plural. At one time, several senior bhikkhus were staying near Migapathaka at the wild mango grove. It was during this time that one day, having returned from their alms round and having eaten their noonday meal, these bhikkhus sat together in the pavilion, whereby the following discussion developed among them. And this is a normal setting in the old days. Bhikkhus were not supposed to talk politics, or who's winning the war, or what's going on with the world. Lord Buddha actually criticized, there are rules for that, not to be talking about, well, how beautiful is this queen compared to that queen over there in that region? Or how big is the army of that king over there? And because many of these bhikkhus sometimes would come together from different regions. So this was an opportunity to almost compare notes, if you will, of what Lord Buddha meant by the teaching that he gave in such and such a discourse. Now, they did not talk about their own personal meditation practice. This is what I have to remind my students again and again and again. When students, Kalyana Mittas, come together to speak together, They are not comparing notes as to, well, which jhana are you on? What attainments did you have this week? No, 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 no. That is completely wrong. You can communicate about the Dhamma, but not doing it often. And when you do, you don't talk about your own practice. That's why you have a teacher. You go to the teacher. Because what you say can and would usually does influence your Kalyanamitta, your friend, and usually influence them in a wrong way. You might feed them some ideas and now they're confused. So, here the bhikkhus are gathered together to discuss the Dhamma. Friends, this is the bhikkhus talking together. Friends, we use the term fetter or bond, Samyojana, and all that gets fettered or bonded. Now, are these two one and the same thing, or are they different in both meaning and phrasing? Does it make a difference if it's just the Samyojana itself versus the thing which is bonded, the result of the bonding? Are they the same thing? Or do they differ only in the phrasing? Some of these bhikkhus began addressing this matter by saying, friends, in using the term fetter or bond, and all that gets fettered or bonded, these things are different in both meaning and phrasing. So there was a exchange of ideas and interpretations. So when you have those, you will have agreements and disagreements. Meanwhile, the businessman Chitta, a lay disciple of the Blessed One, had just arrived at Migapataka to take care of some business. And being informed about what the bhikkhus nearby had been discussing, sitting at the pavilion, he went up to them. After bowing respectfully to the bhikkhus, Chitta sat down to one side and then said to them, Bhantes, I heard that you were engaged in a conversation as to whether the term fetter or bond and all that gets fettered or bonded are one and the same thing, or whether they are different in both meaning and phrasing, or if they differ only in the phrasing. That is correct, householder, replied the bhikkhus. Now, Chitta was not someone that the bhikkhus didn't know or have heard about. Plus, this area, this region was his land. He owned this area. So they are on his land. So he had huge properties. So the bhikkhus, when they see Chitta, they know who they're speaking with. Plus, they had seen him again and again and again at the feet of Lord Buddha, listening carefully. And they've also heard about Chitta from the Buddha himself when Chitta was not there. For example, in the Suttas, Lord Buddha talks very clearly as to who it is that we can emulate, we can copy or look for as our role models. For lay people, in the case of males, because he happens to be male, I'll refer to them. He says, if a lay person wants to have a role model, a spiritual guide in a sense, someone to look up to, because there is such a thing as healthy conceit. I didn't mention that, because you can look up to someone and say, I would like to emulate, I would like to become like him or her. There is such a thing. That works up to a certain extent. Even that has to be dropped, however, in time. So, when he's talking about a lay person using a role model, Lord Buddha says, do not use Venerable Sariputta as your role model. Now, he was the second to Lord Buddha himself in wisdom. He says, if you're a lay person, you must look up to Chitta, the lay person, who happened to be an anagami. And an anagami, you know, does not have the first 5 groups of fetters. Broken free from those. And you know that such a person will, when they die, and if they have not broken free from samsara, they will be reborn in the pure abodes, where only anagamins can be reborn into. Only. Unfortunately, over time, you had the development of Mahayana. They took many of these principles from the Theravada, earliest teachings, and in order for them to become more appealing to the masses, they said, well, anyone can be reborn in the pure realms. They called it Western paradise, Eastern paradise. All you have to do is chant this Buddha's name this many times, or say it with faith, which was highly influenced by other religions that were developing in that part of the world. Manichaeism, Christianity, etc. Bhaktiism, all these were spreading, which definitely infiltrated from Central Asia and other places, and there you had a corruption of the Dhamma, where they took snippets of the Dhamma proper and they turned it into a teaching. And now you have millions and millions and millions of people still believing in that, oh, we're going to Pure Land. It's not that easy. Any Joe Schmo can do that. You just have to say, you live your life, do all these kinds of bad things, and just take the Buddha's name 10 times or whatever, and boom, you're born in Pure Land. It doesn't work like that. Lord Buddha did not struggle for 6.5 years. He didn't teach, even more importantly, for 45 years. Otherwise, it could have been finished in half a sentence. Any idiot could have actually been, yeah, just go Pure Land, boom, you're gone. So we see how laziness was promoted. And when you promote laziness, yeah, you can. By taking away the work that a person has to do. You just spent half a day in meditation. You know how much work that was. But you're not going to get that many supporters, are you? Only the ones who really, really want to put the work and understanding and know how much they have to put the work to gain wisdom. You can't gain wisdom by simply repeating something. That's idiocy. But it's easy, and that's why they don't disappear. And that's why the Dhamma disappears. The teachings of Lord Buddha disappear. And that's what's happening for centuries. So here, oh, by the way, so in case you're wondering as to, well, why not Sariputta, Venerable Sariputta? He used Venerable Sariputta to be looked upon as role models for bhikkhus. Okay? Because he said there will be that discrepancy. So, when I was a layman, I would follow Chitta as my role model. After becoming a bhikkhu, changed. Little selective disclosure for you. That's a term we use in therapy, selective disclosure, revealing something personal. So, so he asked the bhikkhus, is this what you were talking about? And they say, that is correct, householder, replied the bhikkhus. Bhantes, the term fetter or bond and all that gets fettered or bonded, these things are different both in meaning and in phrasing. Now, because he is Chitta, they will have to listen. They cannot just say, well, who are you talking to us? We are bhikkhus, you're a nobody, you're just a householder. No, because if they go back to Lord Buddha, he will scold them. Because they're not, possibly they're not even Sotapannas. Let's find out. They might be, I don't remember. So I will share with you, this is Chitta talking. I will share with you a simile to demonstrate what I mean. as it is through the use of similes that some wise people understand the full meaning of what is being said. Consider two oxen, one white and one black, yoked together by a single harness or yoke. So in Asia, I've seen buffalo, water buffalo. Think of them, you know. In the West, we say ox or oxen for plural. So imagine them being yoked together. So you don't have just one ox. They're combined, they're joined together at the neck by a single harness. What do you suppose would be the correct way to describe their situation? The black ox is the yoke binding the white ox, or the white ox is the yoke binding the black ox? Get it? One ox is white, the other one is black. They're both bound together. Remember, which Samyutta this is coming from, this book? If you remember? Salayatana Vagga, 6 sense spaces. So every sutta within this grouping, and there are thousands of suttas in the connected discourse, but in this grouping, all of them will somehow have to touch upon the 6 sense spaces. The eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the touch, the body, the mind. What's left? Yeah, you get the idea. So he's asking, which one is bound? The white ox or is the black ox the yoke binding the white ox, or the white ox the yoke binding the black ox? And they say, no, householder, it would not be appropriate to describe it so. For neither the black ox is the yoke binding the white ox, nor is the white ox the yoke binding the black ox. The yoke itself is the binding harness, the yoke that is holding them to each other. In the same manner as Bhante, this is Chitta now responding, the eye cannot be considered to be the fetter for visual objects. The eye is not the Samyojana, the thing that binds. The eye is the eye. It's just the eye. Nor are visual objects to be considered as the fetters binding the eye. It is the craving or lust that arises as a result of the eye and visual objects coming together that is the fetter. So you have all kinds of things, if you follow this, if you understand the logic and wisdom here, most of the beliefs that we have been told fall apart about the outside world. In our house, growing up, my parents did not drink alcohol. But apparently, it was a thing. They had this, I think, called lazy butler or something, that with rollers, like a table, that would have all these alcohol on it, bottles of alcohol. We didn't, of course, we didn't drink. We were children, and even as we were growing up, we never touched it. My parents never touched it. But it was just there in the corner of the room, and we would wonder, like, why is it there? My mom would say, oh, it's for your uncle or your cousins when they come. I had older cousins. So that comes to mind. It was there, but none of us touched it. I know I never touched it. You have in America and the world, for the most part, these ideas about weapons and things. Now, as a Buddhist monk, we are against weapons, and we cannot touch weapons, we cannot hold weapons, we cannot use weapons, we cannot possess weapons, of course. However, you live in a world where not everyone sees at the same thing. You have a lot of akusala, a lot of non-virtuous behavior. You have a lot of subspecies behavior. Yeah. not human behavior, where they don't know what restraint means. For that, you need protection. That's why every one of you, when you go home, you lock the door, don't you? Even if you're the most pacifist in the world, you still will lock the doors. Otherwise, you would leave them wide open. The gates too. So what I'm driving at is, people in the world today talk about guns having to be removed and things like that. I'm not a proponent of guns, of course. But we're the same thing with alcohol. Same thing with any substance. Ultimately, it's like the eye looking at a visual object. What is the function turned into? The eye simply sees. It sees the object as simply an object, as a visual object. It does not look at its details. Remember from 2 weeks ago? Not being pulled into its details. Not to say, I have to have that. That means you're sold. When you say, I hate this, as we say in America, you're a goner. You're lost. You're sucked in. So if we carefully listen to what Chitta is saying, we understand that there's something else other than this object, or the subject, if you want to look at it like that, object-subject. The eye, visual object. That's it. It's the craving, the lust, that is the problem here. And that's why you had bhikkhus sitting in the forest, and there's one incident where a woman runs away, a prostitute actually, runs away with there were princes and wealthy people who had like a garden outing, if you will. As they were drunk, as they were sleeping, she grabs all their jewelry and runs away. Well, she passes in front of the bhikkhu. But the bhikkhu was just meditating. And they come and, and he just like, he would just see a skeleton run in front of her. He never saw attractive, because they were describing, oh, she's attractive, her hair's like this, her body's like this, she's running like, she's wearing fragrances. He's like, you're knocking on the wrong door. I don't pick up any of those signals anymore. I just see the bare bones of things. So you're not pulled in to the storyline that the world tries to sell you. Hate this, love this, run away from this. If you see the Dhamma, you're not going to be deceived. Period. That's why you will know what is Dhamma from Adhamma when you encounter it. So you're not a fool to these objects, to ayatana. So the yoke itself is the binding harness that is holding them to each other. In the same manner, Bhante, the eye cannot be considered to be the fetter for a visual object. I think I read that, yes? Yes. The ear, so he lists now the ear. The ear cannot be considered to be the fetter for auditory objects or sounds. Nor are sounds the fetters binding the ear. In the Anguttara Nikaya, again, you have a sutta where Lord Buddha talks about the disciple in higher training, a seika. And he describes how the disciple in higher training, or noble disciple, must be able to bear all the turmoil, or the torture, if you will, that the six senses represent. Meaning, you're not going to always hear lovely sounds, When you're meditating, the person sitting next to you is going to make such a big clamor, noise. You want to kill them, right? You're like, I'm trying to meditate. You start hating, I've seen this. I've experienced it myself. So no matter what happens, The noble disciple hears it, sees it, but does not have that reactionary result happening. Because remember, what is the first Samyojana? Sakkhaya Ditthi. That is shaken at its roots. It's so hard for this person to really enact, follow that same old pattern. So here, it's not those sounds. You might be irritated, you might be shaken, depending on which one of these ladders you're on. You're an anagami, this and that. Only the arahant is not going to be really shaken. Although you've had some arahants who would describe to you, if you're annoying, they would tell you, stop it. They're not zombies. They're not just a piece of furniture, you know. If you do something stupid, they will tell you, stop doing something stupid. They do have understanding, they even have opinions. They're not attached to them, that's the difference. So, it is the craving or lust that arises as a result of the ear and sounds coming together that is the fetter. So when you're hearing a piece of music, or you're hearing a very nasty screeching sound outside, instead of dwelling on the sound, check your attitude. That is what I was trying to say earlier this morning when you first started sitting. Be more interested in what is happening inside of you. When you're seeing Bhante doing this or that, or somebody trying to help Bhante, or making sounds, you're too invested outside of you. There's a lot more interesting things happening inside of you. That's what Chitta is saying. That's where craving is, not the objects. And again, as you guessed it, the nose cannot be considered to be the fetter for smells. Nor are these smells the fetters binding the nose. It is the craving or lust that arises as a result of the nose and smells coming together that is the fetter. I think a few weeks ago I mentioned how you walk into a bathroom sometimes, especially public bathroom, you have to use it, and you're really, really forced to go, and the smell is horrible. You might even change your mind and walk out. That's how bad. But check your attitude. Check your attitude. Are you lost in that feeling? Are you pulled into it? Is this shaking you? Has this shaken you to your roots? If it has, then it means you are yoked fully. And it really doesn't have much to do with the smell, oddly enough, according to what Chitta is saying. Next, as you guessed it, the tongue cannot be considered to be the fetter for tastes or flavors. Nor are these flavors the fetters binding the tongue. It is the craving or lust that arises as a result of the tongue and flavors coming together that is the fetter. Next time you taste the most delicious food, the one that you really, really, really love to eat, check your attitude. What's the difference between this flavor and what I was having earlier? Check your attitude. See how much of a connection, a bind, Samyojana, remember? Bind, fetter. How much of that is there in me touching this, tasting this, smelling this? Meaning you are a slave. Who gets to be bound? Slaves do. Prisoners do. That's what Lord Buddha is saying with Samyojana. Shackles. Your handcuffs. They didn't have handcuffs per se, but they had things that did the same function. Samyojana. So is your taste bud, or are your taste buds serving you as shackles, as handcuffs? And now you're spending the rest of your life always looking for ways to appease these handcuffs, be they taste related, nose related, ear-related, eye-related, etc. The body cannot be considered to be the fetter for tactile objects, nor are these tactile objects the fetters binding the body. It is the craving or lust that arises as a result of the body and tactile objects coming together that is the fetter. The mind, the last of the salayatana. The mind cannot be considered to be the fetter for thoughts or mental objects, nor are these mental objects the fetters binding the mind. Now this is very important, especially because all of you meditated before we began the sutta today. It is the craving or lust that arises as a result of the mind and mental objects coming together that is the fetter. These thoughts are killing me, Bhante, is something that I hear. These memories, how can I get rid of them? They're simply memories. They're dead, you know. They're dead. They just passed. It's like you watching a movie, and immediately the movie frames stop, the lights come on basically, in your eyes you open and it's a white screen, but you see something, a residual image left behind. There's no image, it's your eyes. Optical nerves, rods and cones behind your eyes are still carrying that. Your brain is carrying that. It's making a story out of it. And depending on how much of an attachment you had to these memories, that's how long they will linger. So who is fueling this? We are. The more we don't use wisdom to see them for what they are, the more they become, they give us the impression, rather, that they are real. They're not. Don't believe me? Fine, look in the mirror. Do you look the same as you did 5 years ago? Most probably your hair looked different. Maybe you had hair, now you don't, maybe it's gray now. What am I saying? Anicca. We often forget, we just say it like a mantra, yes, anicca, yes, 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 anicca. Especially when we can't get out of something, we say, oh, it's anicca, boom, end of story. No, there's so much there. When you take yourself so seriously, when you, for example, take your ideas and thoughts and memories so seriously, you're forgetting one very important aspect of life. It is never stationary. It's always moving. That's why there's never anything that is boring. In order for something to be boring, it must be fixed. It must stay the same. Well, nothing is staying the same. That's what Lord Buddha is saying with anicca. Nothing stays the same. Especially you and your hair, your eyesight, your legs, your knees. When you first sat today, you're like, yeah, I'm going to sit today. Yes, yes, I'm not going to move. I'm not going. 5-10 minutes into it, you're like, oh, my back, my bum, my this. What's happening? Anicca. What happened to that fresh start? What happened to that rejuvenated, all that? Anicca. Similarly, we are simply putting fuel into this belief that these memories are real. They're not. It's just a figment of experiences you've lived through, and the mind, the brain, if you will, is playing it. That's it. So treat them simply as passing clouds, as the saying goes. That's it. Or anything that is not your business. Perfect example. When someone else loses someone, but not you, you might feel compassion, you might feel, depending on how close they are, but ultimately you go home knowing that it's not your loved one. Yes? or they lose a shoe, or they lose a bicycle or a car. You get worried, you try to help, but ultimately you come home intact. Can you say the same thing about that friend of yours who lost it? Lost the person, lost the bike? So the tables could have easily turned. You could have been in that position, but you're not. So even that relativity of the fact that this is happening, if it's that serious, then all of us should be affected by it. But it's just my memory, it's affecting me. So you can play these games to dislodge the hold that these memories or thoughts have on us, not to take them so seriously. Because after all, they're just mental objects. Easier said than done, right? But these are the practices you have to do. That's why we have to read these suttas, listen to them again and again and again. What does that mean? A yoke, 2 oxen. What is the eyes? Visual forms. Yoke, my craving, my lusting. Do I do that? Yeah, all of us do that. But to know it is different than intellectually just analyzing. We need to read it, really take it with you. One of the ways that a person can experience Nibbana, sorry, my throat is giving way. One of the ways that a person can awaken is by reading, or at least playing in their mind again and again, what was meant by this? You're chewing on it in your mind. What was meant by this sutta? What was the gist of it? What was the underpinnings of this sutta? What was the message? As you spend time on it, you spend less time in your normal worries, in your memories, in your routine ways of thinking. You disengage, and now you are using the mind in a kusala way. That is giving wisdom the water that it needs to grow. And this is their response, the bhikkhu's response, these Mahathera's response to citta. After he explained this beautifully, he says, they say, "You're so fortunate, householder," exclaimed the bhikkhus. "It is such a great gain for you and for us, as you clearly possess the eye of wisdom," which is the insider's way of saying, basically, you are a noble disciple. Eye of wisdom. Another way of saying, Dhamma Chakku, sometimes they're called, they refer to. Different than Dibba Chakku, which is the divine eye, different. Possess the eye of wisdom with which you comprehend, and with such ease, the very depths of the Dhamma taught by the Blessed One. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So I wanted to share this sutta because it's a powerful sutta. It's a short one, but it's deep. And I especially love this sutta because it comes from a lay person. When over centuries people have looked upon lay people as, nah, sorry, you need to be in robes first. There's no evidence of that. I've never ever come across a single sentence said by the Buddha or any of his noble disciples that says something like that, where a lay person cannot attain. Never. And here's a perfect example. And citta happened to be just one. There's also Singha, the general. There's Uddhacca of Alavi, to name a few. Visakha. So I will pause here and open for any questions you might have. Again, I believe the preference is left for the participants of the retreat first to ask the questions. And if you don't have any questions, then anyone else who joined us later, you could. I think that's the procedure that I was told about. Any questions?
Bhante,
Yes.
you were saying the role for the lay people, citta is for male. How about the lady?
I believe it was Kujuttara. Kujuttara, I think it was. Kujuttara. She was one of the ladies in waiting, if I'm not mistaken, of Queen, not Mallika. Because you also had Vyapada. But she was not that well endowed when it comes to the Dhamma. She was a Sotapanna, but she was not an Anagami. And you had many, many women who were Anagami. Venerable Upalavanna Bhikkhuni was, I believe she was the, for the Bhikkhunis to look up to. I think that's who was the role model for Bhikkhunis. You had a question?
Just for number 5, the Samyojana, Vyapada, is it the same as Patigha?
Patigha is like when you're in a dark room and you see something like you touch something slimy and you're groping, right, in the dark, and you're trying to find the light switch and you touch the slime on the wall. What would you do? You pull your hand, right? So that is one perfect example of Patigha. Vyapada, it can be worked there, but it's not Patigha in the Samyojana listing. It's Vyapada or Vyapada. And that is because Vyapada has more of ill will. Ill will is the English translation because it's more of an umbrella term that carries other emotions, if you will, tendencies underneath it. So I see Patigha part of it, yes. I see more, though, this resentfulness, anger, this almost like vengefulness. I sometimes come across individuals who have been wronged. Somebody did something bad to them, and it's been years. And you talk with them, and you see that they're still holding that anger and hatred, like the image that Lord Buddha used of the hot coal that a person grabs to toss at someone. Well, one person guaranteed is going to burn. You might hit the target, but you might not. But one person definitely was hurt, the person who held and threw. So that is another quality of Vyapada, because they don't seem to be able to let go or disengage from this intense, bitter sense of bitterness, hatred, anger. Ill will is what many people use. I sometimes have used for Vyapada in my translations the English term resentment, because resentment, I've noticed, can also go undetected, under the radar for a long time. Because when we talk about anger, sometimes we think of an angry person, which tells you a lot. You know an angry person. But what if they're hiding it? You might not know it until you find yourself in a crosshairs, in a junction point. Something happens. The conditions are there for them to release the anger. And you wonder, like, where did that come from? I thought we were friends. But resentment, you can still sense it. You can taste it in the air. You can, when you're around that person, you can sense it. And sometimes people say, I don't know something about her. I don't know. I don't feel safe around her. That's a person with Vyapada. Does that answer your question? Any other thoughts, questions? Yes?
There are some people that we meet, come across, that the words they say or the actions that they do hurt another person. But when it is confronted, why do you want to do that? They say the intent. They don't have such intent, but the way they do it hurt the other person. So how do we relate to this Samyojana, or do we put it as conceit, or is it ill will or ignorance?
Well, if the person didn't have intent, and for all, I was going to say intents and purposes, but I can't use that. But if the person doesn't have any intent, nevertheless, they have harmed. And maybe later on they come to you begging you forgiveness or saying, I'm sorry, I did it. Especially in the case of someone who's addicted to that pattern. Then I would say the last one definitely is there.
Avijjha.
You cannot go wrong with avijjha, with any of the akusala behavior. Definitely avijjha is there. That's why the person is not even able, for example, to see conceit in them. I've approached people who have conceit. Even individuals who practice and they've attained some of the jhanas. The way they talk about them experiencing the jhanas tells me very loudly they're very conceited. I met one person, the first sentence that he and I shared, he told me basically, well, he used the words, I've experienced the 8th jhana. We were on a retreat. We were not even supposed to talk about our personal attainments or whatever. So that was kind of something that made me take one step back. What's going on here? Unfortunately, the conceit is so strong, but what is even stronger, that doesn't allow them to see the fact that they have conceit, if that is the truth, that they did experience the 8th jhana, that is. But if they did, they still have underneath it avijjha. Because avijjha is the thing that every one of these has to rely on, in a way. So you can connect avijjha to every single one. That's what I'm trying to say. Does that address your question, you think?
Yeah, yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Of course.
Can you please address this? I'm sure many people would have probably asked the same question about Samyojana number 3, Silabbata, Paramasa. Because you have given an example on a personal level, but most of us are faced with the problem of this problem on a cultural level. So how do we Buddhists view this, and how do we sort of, try to address this? It's kind of difficult for us because I'm sure a lot of religion, they have the same rites and rituals. How do we view this and how do we accept?
Unfortunately, I think you have attended, this is the first time you've attended. If you had attended any of my talks here at the BMV, you would have known my very stern position in regards to rites and rituals in this tradition, in this sasana that we have. So especially, I think the last talk, Janusoni, that I gave last week. So fortunately, Brother Leslie and Brother Jason have put them up on YouTube, the talks. So I highly, highly encourage you, because I don't have the energy to go over all of those. But in fairness to your question here, in this present moment, I will try to address it somehow, although briefly. Yes, it is a problem. It is a human problem. And I say human because it's everywhere, you see. Because this takes us back to the time of living in caves, if you will, or living outdoors, and there's lightning strikes, and we all of a sudden need to make sense of what's happening. So you start adding imagery. You start adding, like Plato even, recent history, 2,000 years ago, approximately. He had form, capital F form and lowercase form. You had later on archetypes by Carl Jung, that there's this out there and there's this in here. So we have to grope in the dark, which can easily turn our lives into this. The symbolism can be given, not have on its own, can be given a life of its own. Over centuries, what has happened, I come from a Christian background. And in the past, several times I've mentioned how I've gone to a Christian monastery. That's where my religious training began as a teenager. When I walked in with my own, no one prompted me. I walked into those, doors, looking for something meaningful, something per se spiritual, something of the mysterious. Now, over years, I looked for it. I couldn't find anything. What you did have are rites and rituals, and you see the same thing across the board in different religions. But what we have is this mass thinking where we find comfort. If you're doing something and I do the same thing and two other people do the same thing, guess what? We find comfort in that. And that develops a life of its own. So it no longer actually has to disturb any of the things that presumably it started with. So what we are doing is trying to resuscitate a dead corpse. Go ahead and feed a dead corpse food. Fill it up with oxygen as much as you want. They're not going to get up and speak to you, talk about the weather. But that's what we're doing. Now I can't talk about Christianity, I can talk about my tradition in Theravada. You see this a lot. This teacher worship is another rites and ritual, by the way. People bow down to the teacher and they think he's usually a he in Theravada. He's a god or something. He's unmistakable, unfailing, on this, on that. Infallible. Well, Lord Buddha said, even I'm not. That's why you have Vimansaka. He had back pain. That's what I mean by infallible. Not the wisdom was fallible. No, because we have turned him into something other than what he was. Even bowing down to the statue. It's a statue. It's just made of clay, and some places, some temples, some monasteries will not consider themselves as proper monastery or temple unless there's a Buddha statue. Well, why? Why is that? Or we have to chant a certain amount of time, an hour at least. Why is that? There's nothing wrong with studying the suttas, learning the suttas, memorizing suttas. But not for the sake of knowing it, memorizing it to show off or something. Understand the meaning. Because through understanding and even repetition of it, if you're doing it right, you might at least become a Sotapanna. In that sense, go ahead, but don't turn it into rites and ritual. That's the problem. And that's why the whole temple has turned into a, but people love that. It's easy. It's easy. You get one of those red envelopes, you squeeze some money in there, hand over to the monk, we're good to go. You offer a monk something and that's it, you're good to go. Okay, that's cheapening the Dhamma. That's not what Lord Buddha taught for 45 years. In fact, he would discourage people from just looking at that. He didn't discourage dana, don't misunderstand me. Dana is important. Without that, the Sangha cannot exist. The Dhamma will disappear truly, but it is disappearing anyhow. Whatever you have, that won't even exist. So, it doesn't have to be rites and ritual. And remember, take the example that Chitta gave here. You will have rites and rituals or ceremonies. Even sitting and meditating, bowing, let's say. Sometimes there's nobody, no Buddha statue, nobody in the room, and somebody is moved by an experience. And they start tearing up, they start crying. When a person attains Sotapatti, one of the first things that happen is they start crying from joy. And they bow. There's nobody there to bow to. Now, I won't consider that rites and ritual. But people look at that from the outside and they say, oh, look at that, how beautiful. Next time we do this, we do that. We add that. And now the ritual starts to expand. We add little motifs. Some incense here, lighting fixtures. Oh, the roof has to be this way. Oh, we can't have it not that way. All these nonsensical things which take away from the... In some countries, if you go with these robes, Buddhist countries, Theravada countries, they will still see you as somewhat of a bhikkhu, but not full-fledged bhikkhu like theirs. Until you go through their own spiel, you jump through their hoops. It has nothing to do with the Dhamma. Because Lord Buddha gave only one kind of higher ordination, one upasampada. One. So that also is the rites and rituals. So it has a lot to do with nationalistic values. It has nothing to do with the Dhamma. So I hope that answers your question.
Bhante, can you please help elaborate craving according to the Paticca because it jumps many steps. And then, if possible, how can I understand this craving, especially it is seen very loud in Vyapada?
It is seen very loudly in Vyapada.
Vyapada.
And why Vyapada only?
It's very loud. It's a very loud emotion.
For you?
Yes.
Why?
Yes. Not satisfied. Yeah. The teaching
emotion
is so loud, the teaching is so loud that I have to listen to it and see what it is. So because in this sutta, there are many steps jumped straight, How can I use this formula to see this craving?
You ask me this question now?
I know.
Not to discourage your question, because this question is rich. Rich. It's multi-layered. I usually would say it's loaded. Well, in a good way, loaded, again. One of the major problems of interpreting the Paticca links, the law of dependent origination, or the causal relations, structure, formula, is people just memorize these steps. And they swear by the 12 steps. And they say, the Buddha only taught that. Well, no. In some places he taught less links. When we look at any of the teachings in a linear fashion, in boxes, what I like to term it as left brain way, then you will definitely run into some problems. Every single one of the links has within it the Four Noble Truths. So if you can just think of it like that. Let's pick craving. A person who's carefully looking at Paticca craving is a person who's able to penetratingly see craving as dukkha. Next, the question will be, why? Where is this dukkha coming from, this craving? Where is it coming from? What happened? Where did this craving arise from? Remember the eye? Remember the objects, visual objects? Are these the reason? See, already you understood parts of the sutta when you say no. So you penetrate even deeper and you start looking at every single thought as you're practicing. This is why we need to study, but it has to be applied into your daily life in the presence of sati. Sati is not just when you're sitting. Anytime you are approaching something, you're about to touch something that you like, All my life as a child, every time I would touch sandpaper, it would irk me. I would just go, oh. Or glass, fine glass. You know, I used to be a jeweler when I was a child. I was learning, journeyman. So my boss would give me, you know, I was an apprentice. He would give me a piece of sandpaper and say, okay, go ahead and polish this piece of gold. Make it smooth and shiny. I would cringe because my body would I would start itching. I hated the touch of sandpaper. That's craving. Because people always think craving is something that makes you go jump at something. But you're looking only to one side of craving. You're not looking at the other side. What are you jumping away from? Because if I'm jumping towards something, I'm jumping away from something. This is basic Newtonian physics, right? So, to be able to see that allows you to see more of a 360 view of craving. And you start looking for it in your normal life. Specifically in your likes and dislikes. See, I don't care for the Abhidhamma breakdown of Paticca Samuppada and how many cravings there are. Of course, you can list them up. You know, with the 6 senses, you can divide them, multiply them. It becomes all of a sudden 18, multiplies further, further, further. But how is that useful to you in your life? That's what I care about. So is this something you can take with you? What I'm saying right now, can you look at your likes and dislikes, trying to identify craving in that sense? Would you be able to do that, what I'm sharing with you? Can you take it with you?
Maybe. Maybe.
Well, remember, I mentioned only the 2 noble truths in connection to craving.
Yeah.
What's the 3rd noble truth? Cessation. What is cessation? What is Nirodha? Cessation of what? No. What? Yes. What craving is causing, the cessation, the ending of that, which is what? Pain. Because if you're wanting something, that house or that car that your neighbor has that you always wanted but you never got, that wanting is also creating so much fire in you. That is suffering. But the moment you see this, like, why am I suffering? Because of my craving. Okay, why is craving there in the first place? Because I'm holding on to this desire that I want that too. When you see this, suddenly what happens? That's a mini nibbana. Small. Because you released. Nibbana is not something that will happen sometime later in the future in a kuti somewhere on a retreat necessarily, when you shave your head or something. Before it happens, you're getting glimpses, if you're on the right track. That's why Paticca Samuppada is a very powerful teaching that Lord Buddha gave, but you have to understand how to unravel it, not just to list them, yes, you know, salayatana, paccaya, this. No! Understand why. Why does clinging come out of craving? Because it crystallizes into grabbing, upadana. Because the person missed the boat. They're still stuck on it, but they never questioned, they never asked, why am I wanting that house? Why am I in pain? You have spouses getting angry at each other. And typically, from my cases as a therapist, they would sit down in couples therapy and I would ask them, why are you mad? For example, the husband would say, I don't know why she's mad. I didn't do anything. I'm not a cheater. I'm not a gambler. I'm not a this. I'm not a that. Why? And she says, I don't know either. Eventually, if you poke, and then finally you see that there's some comparison going on. They don't have what the other people have. So her suffering now is their suffering. Now, how to fix this? That's the fourth noble truth. Apply the Eightfold Path. Because if you have the right view, this house is not bad. We all live here comfortably. Why do I have to have an extra room? If I need a garden, okay, there's a park over there. Let me walk there. Big deal. Meanwhile, I can work towards it, but I'm not going to lose sleep over this. Because I appreciate my spouse, I appreciate my family, I want to keep the peace and harmony. Thank you very much. Already, that's hitting several of the Noble Eightfold Path factors. There's Samma Vacha. Obviously, there's Samma Sankappa. There's Samma Kammanta. There's action that is appropriate, harmonious. So you see, in your life, just picked one aspect, one link of the noble Paticcasamuppada, and it breaks down. You don't need to know all of them either, by the way. You can pick the Salayatana, it's the same thing. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes, and also you mentioned like and dislike. It's a label. How do we see it not as like and dislike? Because the thing that irks us is a like and dislike.
No, it's not.
Like, for example, I would label this. To me, it's a like, but somebody may be a dislike.
You're talking about labels. You're talking about words. It's a feeling. You're forgetting it's a feeling. Like and dislike, when they show up in your life, they're very personal. You know when something is something that you like. And when there's something that you dislike, you know that even better. It shakes you. So it's no longer labels. Labels separate us from the thing being experienced. So that's why I emphasize the practice of metta, bhavana, because it's so powerful, because it is feeling based. You can feel, it's a higher, lofty, noble emotion, metta. And we all can feel that. And at the same time, it springboards us, jumps us all the way to Nibbana, if you do it right. Because it recalibrates your understanding of what it is that we call like and dislike. So my throat is really giving way, and I still have 3 hours to do another retreat. So I will stop here, because tomorrow also. So I don't know how I'm going to do it, so I will stop here.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So cute.